Hey everyone, Chris here from the review thing. Today I'm going to be giving my thoughts / opinions on the Resident Evil 3 Remake. Just to preface this video, I'm doing my best to keep it somewhat structured or cohesive, as I usually find myself rambling or going on branching tangents when discussing my thoughts on a game, especially a series I'm really fond of. I've never really done an opinion, review, feedback, whatever video, so this is the first time. If you haven't already, you can check out a playthrough I've done on a channel or a few podcasts where I bring up the game. The entire playthrough is uploaded, it's 10 episodes. Other than that, I'm probably done a good 20 playthroughs of the game at this stage on both PC and Xbox One. I've taken the time to 100% both platforms. I've finished the game on the highest difficulty, no shop items. I've done everything, basically, that I could with this game. The game has been well out for over a month now, so I think spoiler discussion is fine in regards to discussing my feedback and thoughts on this game. So please be warned, there will be spoilers in this video. You have been warned. From this point onwards, there will be spoilers. To kick this video off, I suppose some information history on the game I'm going to be talking about would be beneficial for some newcomers. Resident Evil 3 Remake is a remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Shocking, guys, I know, sorry. The original Resident Evil 3 came out in 1999 for the PS1 and was later ported to numerous consoles like the Dreamcast, GameCube, and even PC got one. The game takes place before, during, and after the events of RE2 as you battle and explore your way through an infected Raccoon City as Jill Valentine, a surviving member of STARS from the mansion incident of RE1. In doing so, you are pursued by Nemesis, a tyrant-type bioweapon sent in to hunt down and eliminate STARS members. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was a decent leap of gameplay difference from RE2. The game threw a lot more enemies at you, gave you a lot more firepower early on, and dotted ammo and gunpowders throughout. A lot of people assume Resident Evil 4 was the shift in the series in terms of bringing a lot more action to the table, which is kind of incorrect. There was a lot more faster enemies in RE3 than previous entries, some new and some old. Drain Deimos and Brainsuckers being new, Hunter, Beta and Gamma being technically new, but really they're just hunters with new skins. And of course, fan favourites, the Cerberus dog. Overall, the game had an amazing variety of enemies. On top of all the pre-mentioned, you had your zombies, you had some miscellaneous enemies like worms, and of course, spiders. Even the zombies themselves had different mechanics from previous Resident Evil games. They could go turbo, meaning they could move towards you in a fast, staggered-like manner. The boss fights themselves were pretty cool too. A neat little feature that was added in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the dodge mechanic. In previous Resident Evil games, if a zombie made a successful grab towards you, you were in Chomp Town and it was dinner time. However, in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, if you aimed at the moment of a grab or a grab connect, Jill would shimmy push away the attacker, giving you a window to attack or retreat, which could turn the tide in some tight or clutch encounters. Being able to explore Raccoon City and the various sections was really cool and a nice change from the previous games mostly being set in the one area, like the mansion of RE1 or the police station for RE2. Though not bad at all, and some of my favourite settings are those games, it was nice to see things from street level, literally. So with the general gist of the backstory done of the original Resident Evil 3, how does the remake tackle these and how does it hold up? The short answer is not so good. Before I get into why, let me touch on what the RE3 Remake did a good job of. If you've played RE2 Remake, which was a fantastic addition to the series and a superb remake, you'll feel pretty much at home with the RE3 Remake as the overall gameplay and UI is pretty much the exact same. RE3 Remake continues the modern RE system of using the RE engine, which was introduced to us with Resident Evil 7 and has been used since for Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil Resistance, and even Devil May Cry 5. It's actually a really nice engine, and you can see it shine through with the RE3 Remake. The city is alive and has a variety of contrasting colours thanks to the bright neon lights of the various storefronts and shops. Thanks to that, the addition of some good sound design as well, the city feels alive. And you'll hear PA systems in the background, announcements of the outbreak, radio still on broadcasting their shows, the echoes and murmurs of people and zombies in the distant background. Even a donut diner has the credit music for Resident Evil 2 playing over the speakers, and it just feels really cool to hear that and just, to stop playing and just listen to it and just rock out. Touching on the sound design, the soundtrack is phenomenal. It's a rearrangement, remade version of the original RE3 soundtrack with some new additions thrown in there. Definitely adds to the overall atmosphere of the game, and it makes it feel like, this is a really dangerous city. The characters and voice acting for the most part are great. One-dimensional characters that were in the original have been fleshed out here, even if their screen time is minimal, or even if they're not mentioned much, they have more depth in their old school forms. The dialogue and overall writing can be a bit hit or miss, but sometimes I think it actually adds to the experience, almost like a 90s horror movie vibe, kind of, B-side, kind of cheesy-ish kind of thing. The replayability is decent too. There's a post-game shop where you can save up points, which are earned by doing various challenges throughout the game, like, I don't know, kill 4 enemies in a row with one shot kind of thing. There's an entire list of them. These points then can be used in the shop to buy stuff like the Infinite Rock Launcher, which has always been a staple unlock in the Resident Evil series. There's also stuff like offensive items that increase your offensive power, or you can get stuff like defensive items, which do the exact same thing, increase your defense power. Beyond that, there's also 2 difficulties to unlock, besides the default 3. For the default, you have Assisted, Normal, and Hardcore. If you've played Resident Evil 2 Remake, Hardcore isn't the same, even in terms of difficulty. It's more like Normal Plus, and it's like normal mode, but just a kind of bit more beefier enemies kind of thing. But the 2 unlockable difficulties and unique to Resident Evil 3 are Nightmare and Inferno, and these unlock in succession to each other. So you beat Hardcore, you unlock Nightmare. Nightmare unlocks Inferno. While generally being tougher than the 3 default difficulties, with enemies dealing more damage, being more aggressive and faster, Nightmare and Inferno twist things up a tiny bit by switching up the item and enemy placements, making it almost like a really bare bones randomizer. Some mid to late game enemies appear a lot early on too. Now, all this talk of good things, I have yet to mention the big guy himself, Nemesis. So how does he fare in comparison to the original? Now, I think this is a good segue into what the remake did poorly. Nemesis' main design and feeling is outstanding. I really love it. His sound design, like from the way he walks, the way he punches, the way he breathes, the way he utters his classic stars line, and his music theme when he's after appearing and he's chasing you, is really good. Now, you might be saying, Chris, I thought we were moving on to the negative aspects of this remake. Don't worry, you are correct. Strap your butts in because it's about to get bumpy. So that awesome aspect of Nemesis I just mentioned is gone within roughly like an hour or so of the game, after your first boss fight with him, after you've just ascended this blazing construction site, which Nemesis caused by chasing you slowly with a flamethrower. The fight itself is one of my favourites in the game, and honestly, it's probably the only good one. Nemesis is unfortunately too scripted in this game. The small fragments where he's not scripted is where it shines, as it shows the true stalking tyrant. And on the higher difficulties, he moves a lot faster, which is a terrifying thing. But beyond that, he rarely appears, and the few sections he does, he's an absolute pushover. Touching on the scripted aspect, like Nemesis being too scripted, the game itself is very heavy on the rails with gameplay and cutscenes. Thankfully, all the cutscenes can be skipped, which is nice on reruns, but some of the on-rails feels really boring and will be way more interesting and fun if the player controlled those sections. Like at the start, you're being chased by Nemesis through your apartment, or the entire apartment block, I should say. If it was done right, that could have been an entire section of cat and mouse where Nemesis is hunting you down through the various floors. But instead, it's just you basically running away. Like late game, you're being chased and the only thing you can do is hold forward and wait for the scripted scene or the following cutscenes to end. It's just not fun. Back on Nemesis, his following metamorphoses, while they are cool in the design, I was very disappointed with when they appeared or when he transformed with. I understand it's a remake and things are going to differ, and with some enemy designs are going to get tweaked, they're going to get beefier, but it just feels like typical modern Resident Evil game design, like Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 onwards, where it's just a big ass mutated like bioweapon and it's just, yeah, just all in your face. In the original, Nemesis had a gradual transformation, going from his unarmed self to his rocket launcher self to his tentacle hand enemy, and then eventually at the very end to his final metamorphosis. Not only am I not a fan of these transformations in the remake, I loathe these boss fights surrounding them transformations. The biggest issue is with these fights is the camera, which cannot be fixed as far as I could tell or try, or even Googling it didn't have anything. The camera would zoom in on Nemi, making it feel really claustrophobic, and it was honestly annoying to fight with the camera being so close. This is for the Clock Tower Plaza fight and the Acid Bat Nemi fight. Both are practically the same fight, but with abysmal camera work. It just screws you over in the latter fight, where you're in the Acid Bath arena and Nemesis is like circling you from above and like zombies spawn in. With the camera focus on Nemi, sometimes you can't see the zombies coming from left or right unless your camera is like, you know, zoned into that area. On higher difficulties, like pale heads spawn into that arena and you get grabbed so easily and it can really fuck you up. And while I dislike the final fight, it's almost like a cheap Dark Souls boss fight, like Beta Chaos 2.0. Even though I dislike it, it's actually a better design and fight overall from the original, so at least that has something going for it. Now, going back to the main game, there's a lot of cut content from the original. The city itself feels a lot smaller than the original, which is a massive shame given we're now working with the RE engine, and the fact that it's a remake. They could have done so much with showing us what Raccoon City is like in the year 2020 with the technology we have. Obviously the game is set in the 90s. This is probably due to the fact that the game was either handled by another team or it was outsourced. I believe it was outsourced. Resident Evil 2 Remake was released at the end of January 2019, and towards the end of 2019, RE3 Remake was announced with a release date of April 2020. That's a very, very short window, isn't it? Entire sections, enemies, and even boss fights didn't even make it into the remake, such as the actual clock tower. Like, we fought outside the clock tower. We didn't even get to go inside the clock tower. The park in the original was a nice enough, you know, it was small enough, but it was a nice area. The graveyard where we fought the infamous Gravedigger, and even the factory / waste plant wasn't even there. We didn't even get to explore the RPD as Jill, which was one of my favourite parts in the original after just your first encounter with Nemesis. Spiders have still yet to make an appearance in one of these modern Resident Evil remakes. They appeared in Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 0, but we have yet to see them in these modern remakes, as in Resident Evil Remake 2 and Resident Evil Remake 3. Gravedigger, as I mentioned previously, was nowhere to be seen either. The only positive thing I can say is the hospital has been extended and it's a lot longer than the original, and it feels great. Until the game decides, you know what, let's just turn this area into a horror type game mode. You're basically defending a room with multiple window points of entry, and the zombies appear in each of the windows, and you start getting like swarmed. It's probably one of the worst parts of the game, and it feels like something that was ripped directly from Resident Evil 4. Due to the combination of the previously mentioned, the pacing of the game feels weak and rushed. Even small details feel really disappointing, like the reduced gore system. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, if you focused on shooting a limb, like an arm for example, it would eventually kind of shred and like get mushed and just slowly kind of fall apart, and if like the sound effects combined with the visual made it really satisfying. None of this is present in Resident Evil 3 Remake. Outside of crit headshots, or if you're aiming directly like with a shotgun to the head, the impact of your weapons feel non-existent. Like the feedback from them is just like shooting at sponges. It just feels weak. Even shooting zombies in Resident Evil 2 Remake, you know, there was like a squelchy sound, and you could see the blood splatter from like a point, like the bullets were ripping through flesh. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, they toned that back for some reason, and it's like an odd decision. While I mentioned the overall sound design is pretty good, most of the weapons sound very weak and just unsatisfying to fire. And in the horde mode section, the bodies just disappear into like a puddle of goop, like someone just like despawned them, and it's almost kind of made me cringe. While the design and overall functionality of the Hunter betas is pretty good, there's a one-hit mechanic that's frustrating, especially when it would sometimes vacuum me into its hitbox. On the higher difficulties, when you're getting through like a tougher area and you're doing well, and you get suctioned into a hitbox, it's the most frustrating experience in one of these games. The game itself is insanely short as well. My first run through the game on hardcore, I clocked in under 5 hours, and that was exploring every nook and cranny. While the post-game shop is a nice addition, the lack of unlockable costumes was very disappointing. Not including the default costumes or the exclusive pre-order outfit, there is only one outfit to unlock. One. The original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, depending on what platform you played on, had 6 to 7 unlockable costumes. Jill in Resident Evil Resistance has several costumes to unlock. Now, I haven't mentioned Resident Evil Resistance up until this point, and for good reason too. Resident Evil Resistance is an online 4v1 game, where 4 players play as survivors, all with their own unique skill set and playstyle, and one plays as the mastermind who sets up traps and summons in enemies. This was announced last year before Resident Evil Resistance and was met with severe backlash. Fast forward to the announcement of Resident Evil 3 Remake, it was announced that Resident Evil Resistance was going to be a free game included with Resident Evil 3 Remake. Which just reeks of Resident Evil 3 Remake being an absolute rushed game for them just to tag Resident Evil Resistance on to make it look like it has actual content. That being said, how does Resident Evil Resistance play? In short, absolute fucking dog shit. That's what. I don't have any footage of my dive into Resident Evil Resistance, but here's my experience summed up with both the Xbox and PC version. It was lag-filled games that took even ages to find lobbies to begin with. You get teamed up with other similar level players, rarely, and get pitted against a very high level mastermind a lot of the times. Some of the mastermind and spawn types are just outright broken too. No dedicated servers either, so everything is peer-to-peer based, which is amazing when the mastermind is host, not doing well, decides to quit, causing the game to end, booting everyone, so now you have to wait a long time before finding another game. Fun. You get players who troll often, either AFKing, not helping search for key items, or have actually searched for the key items and just don't proceed to use them. They just stand there. Control wise, it feels a lot more jankier than Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake. I don't know if it's just because of the online component to it, but it just feels like I've hopped out of Resident Evil 3 and into a different control game, even though it's all in the same engine and controls the same. It's such a slap in the face that this game has so many cosmetic unlocks, and Resident Evil 3 Remake got absolutely shafted. Again, given how barren Resident Evil 3 Remake is, I shouldn't really be surprised. Going back to the main game a second, for the original Resident Evil, there was an unlockable game mode once you finished the game called the Mercenaries, or Operation Mad Jackal. You got to pick 3 of the members from the Umbrella Corps, Mikhail, Nikolai and Carlos, each of them with their own loadout, and basically each of them was more difficult to play than the other. So like Mikhail had like a rocket launcher, shotgun and magnum, so he was obviously the easiest to play. Carlos had like a submachine gun and a pistol, so he was like medium, and then Mikhail had a knife, so he was the hardest. The goal of Mercenaries was you'd start at one point of the game, which was the subway, and you'd have to make your way back to the very start of the game. But you had 2 minutes on the clock, and every kill would add a certain amount of time to the clock. Along the way, you'd find enemies from all parts of the game. You'd find hunters, spiders, you'd find multiple nemesis, stuff like that. And each kill would add on more time, depending on the difficulty of the enemy. You'd get more time, so on and so forth. Along the way, off the beaten path, you'd find survivors, NPCs that you'd have seen in the game or some actually past Resident Evil games. By helping these survivors, which were usually just surrounded by like zombies or whatever, they would give you an extra bit of time, and you'd also get an item off them, usually either like ammo or health. Once you reach the end, your time left is tallied up and you're given points. And these points could have been saved up to buy stuff, just like the shop in Resident Evil 3 Remake. There was only 4 unlockables, so it was an assault rifle with infinite ammo, Gatling gun with infinite ammo, rocket launcher with infinite ammo, and all weapons with infinite ammo, each one costing more as it went on. The thing is, even though it had limited like unlockable stuff, it had such replayability. You would do so many like rounds, you'd like try out different tactics, you'd try out different routes, you'd see how fast you try to get it done. Could you get to the end without taking any damage? It was such a fun mode that I almost nearly spent more time in Mercenaries than I did with the base game, and that's saying something. That was completely cut from Resident Evil 3 Remake. It didn't even make an appearance. Instead, we got Resistance that no one wanted or asked for. If anything, the only online game any Resident Evil fan has asked for is a remake of Outbreak, or even a remaster brought to modern consoles with fixed networktivity. Overall, Resident Evil 3 Remake, it is a good game. It truly is. But in terms of a Resident Evil game, it's very lackluster, and it's very disappointing as a remake that obviously didn't have the old school fans in mind whatsoever. The absolute disregard for the source material and the addition of Resident Evil Resistance is disheartening, considering how amazing Resident Evil 2 Remake was. Even though that did have cut content as well, it was still a beefy game in terms of content. We had Leon and Claire scenarios, and then we had the B scenarios, which not really much of a difference, but it's still basically 4 playthroughs. And on top of that, you had free DLC, which added on tons of new content, and it had the unlockable tofu and hunk modes that were in the original and brought forward. You can tell that there was way more love put into Resident Evil 2 Remake versus Resident Evil 3. It's a night and day difference. I purchased the Collector's Edition and Standard Edition. The game was $60 in launch for the Standard Edition. For the content you're getting, it is not worth the $60 whatsoever. I would wait until it drops to maybe 30 or below and wait to pick it up, or watch it on YouTube to decide. There's probably a few things I'm forgetting at this stage, and I'm pretty much done with Resident Evil 3 Remake now. I probably won't return to it anytime soon. It's an absolute shame to see such wasted potential in this game. It truly is. I just hope that the next installment in the Resident Evil series, new game or remake, it's a lot more like Resident Evil 2 Remake and less like Resident Evil 3 Remake. Anyway, that's all that's on my mind regarding this game. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable to watch to listen, and if you did enjoy it, consider subscribing to our channel and follow us on our social media stuff. We're constantly pumping out content, and we've got some cool stuff on the way. Other than that, it's been Chris with the review thing again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.